If you're new in town or just new to this whole podcast thing, you're tuning in to Law by Night, the podcast that discusses all things vampiric with no fear of breaching the masquerade. In this episode, we continue the Re-Embrace series, where we take a popular vampire in fiction and put them into Vampire the Masquerade. This episode will focus on the Countess from the Darkest Dungeon DLC, The Crimson Court. So, you want to put everybody's insectoid Camilla in your game of Vampire the Masquerade? Of course you do, you fucking bloodsucker. Why else would you be here, other than to judge me with gross curiosity? In the previous episode of this series, we embraced Marceline Abadir as an NPC belonging to Clan Gangrel. Since then, there have been many suggestions and ideas for the next media-based vampire we put through the Re-Embrace ritual. I do not recall anybody mentioning the final boss from the Darkest Dungeon DLC, the Crimson Court, so why am I doing it? Cause I want to embrace another thick vampire mummy, so if that bothers you, go jump off a cliff. But before I unpack my thought process on how I made a character sheet for the Countess, there are a couple things I wish to point out first. To make things as simple as possible for me, I shall be using the official Darkest Dungeon wiki as my source of information for the Countess, because I am not prepared to play through this crawling game again to obtain the deep lore. So if there is any information about her that I have missed or anything that does not exist as of the writing of this script, tough. The placement of stats, disciplines, and clan are all down to my interpretation to what I have seen and read, so I really do not care if you say the way I've created this NPC is wrong. This is only to serve as a helpful and flexible guide. And with that out of the way, let us delve into the courtyard and hatch a bewitching predator. Unlike the other vampires in this series, there is actually very little we gather in terms of backstory to pull the dank lore from. We only get two cutscenes, one at the beginning and the end of the Crimson Court DLC. Now, I could condense this down for you and just read from the wiki, but I have Wayne June here and his posse of aristocratic bitches who can do that just as well.
In those younger years, my home was a hive of unbridled hedonism, a roiling apiary, where instinct and impulse were indulged with wild abandon. A bewitching predator slipped in amidst the swarm of tittering sycophants. Though outwardly urbane, I could sense in her a mocking thirst, driven half-mad by cloying vulgarity. I plotted to rid myself of this lurking threat in a grand display of sadistic sport. But as the moment of murder drew nigh, the gibbous moon revealed her inhuman desires in all their stultifying hideousness. Mercifully, the morbid encounter resolved itself in my favor, and I set to work pursuing degeneracy in its most decadent forms. The air pulsed with anticipation as I revealed the unnatural terroir of the house vintage, but my exultation was cut short as the attending gentry turned upon themselves in an orgy of indescribable frenzy. A single drop of that forbidden tannin gifted me with a dizzying glimpse of the hibernating horror beneath my feet, and in that moment, I understood the terrible truth of the world. I stood reborn, molded by newfound knowledge, my head throbbing to the growing wine of winged vermin come to drink the tainted blood of the Darkest Dungeon.
Not bad, Wayne. Not bad for an amateur. Well done. Anyway, there are a couple of key things I want to pull from this. Firstly, this bitch got presents. More importantly, it can be implied that the human form of the Countess is a facade. In the game, she has two, technically three forms. Whilst always fairly monstrous, the first two, thirsty and flushed, are slightly more humanoid than the last one. Coincidentally, these are also words I would use to describe my feelings regarding the boss. It is the last and most horrific of forms, bloodlust, that is the implied true form. In the previous narration and cutscene are to be believed, rather than being a case of wild vicissitude in play. In VTM terms, we can view this as a very clever use of Mask of a Thousand Faces. And with all this in mind, it is very clear to me that the Countess of the Darkest Dungeon DLC, the Crimson Court, can only be one clan. the Nosferatu. Besides the fortitude and presence, this big bitch possesses all the other disciplines and acts much like a Nosferatu, squatting not in a warren but a courtyard filled with rotten meat. As for her generation, we can assume she is an elder, as her powers are particularly potent and we have no idea who made her or just how long ago it was when the ancestor decided to cut her throat and turn her blood into wine for the rich nobles for the shits and giggles. So, to be fair, let us say she is of the 8th generation. Not too old, relatively speaking, but not containing world-altering powers. As we are making an NPC character, we can be a bit more lenient with the distribution of dots than we would do if we were making a regular neonate or an ancilla. It does also mean I'll be doing a fair amount of guesswork as to where I will distribute her points to what I believe would make sense. As one could imagine, the Countess is not very fast, due to her unimaginable size and thickness. We've established that she has lots of defense, so she would have a lot of stamina and health to reflect this. Despite the interesting twists on vampirism, she still falls under the alluring, manipulative traits of old, and she has the wits to seek out the ancestor to drain him dry despite her failings. So what did I put down? Well, starting with physical, strength has 3 dots, dexterity has 2, and stamina has 5. Social, we have 3 dots in charisma, 2 dots in manipulation, and 4 dots in composure, and with mental, 2 dots in intelligence, 4 dots in wits, and 4 dots in resolve. It means that we have 8 dots of willpower and 8 dots of health. Similar to the attributes, one has to improvise a bit more when assigning points to skills, which I believe makes sense. Most of the points we will be dumping into her as a role as a gluttonous ruler, and her ability to clap harder than me against your mother on a Friday night. One should also keep into account that she's in fact an animal expert of sorts and can manage pretty well in inhospitable climates while she is injured, surviving countless amounts of torture as well. So I have put 2 dots in athletics, 4 dots in brawl, 2 dots in melee, and 4 dots in survival. Animal Care has 5 dots, Etiquette has 2 dots and so does Insight, Intimidation has 3 dots, Leadership has 4 dots, Performance with Singing has 1 dot, Persuasion has 2 dots, Subterfuge has 3 dots, Awareness has 3 dots, Investigation has 2 dots, and Occult has 1 dot. Compared to the previous episodes in the Re-Embrace series, assigning the discipline dots is actually surprisingly easy. Animalism has 5 dots, Bonfomulus, Feral Whispers, Quell the Beast, Unliving Hive, and Animal Dominion. They also have Obfuscate and Potence. Obfuscate has 3 dots, Silence and Death, Cloak of Shadows, and Mask of a Thousand Faces. Potence has 3 dots, Lethal Body, Prowess, and Brutal Feed. I have given them Fortitude with 1 dot and chosen Resilience, which makes that health of 8, now 9, and they also have the 1 dot in Presence. So let's clear up the rest of the character sheet. The name is the Countess. Chronicle, I've gone with Courtyard by Night, but do whatever the fuck you want. We do not know if they have a sire, and if there is one, we don't know their name, so I've just put a bunch of question marks there because it made me smile at the time. The clan is Nosferatu. The generation is 8. Their humanity is 3, which I honestly feel was a tad generous, and their blood potency is 4. And that, they say, is that. Together, we have re-embraced the Countess in Clan Nosferatu, with what I believe is a decent representation of her with a cool V5 character sheet. I hope you found this useful, whether you wanted to create the Countess for your own games, or perhaps you had no idea how to go about putting stats to elders. Hopefully, with future installments of the series, you'll grow more confidence in creating NPCs for your own games. As with the previous episodes in this series, I would love to hear about which vampires we should re-embrace together, so let me know on social media and in the comments of the YouTube upload of this episode, and I'll just add them to the meat grinder. To be kept updated, follow the Law by Night VTM Twitter and Instagram pages to find out when we upload each episode. You can also find out by subscribing to the YouTube channel and clicking on the little bell, as you'll be immediately notified when the latest episode is live. Until next time, farewell.